we back in the 80s, this is the early 90s even, we thought that being vegan itself was healthy. There were very few, now Dr. Esselstyn knew better by then, and a few others knew better, but we were still in the realm of, as long as it's vegan, you're doing good for yourself and good for the planet. But I gained 200 pounds on a vegan diet.
Oh, in a full year, and that lets you save. Look here.
True Form Life.
Green look on.
Welcome to Exploring Mind and Body with Drew Tadia. Drew is an expert in nutrition, fitness, lifestyle, and more. And he wants to help you live a healthier, longer, and more active life. Now here's your host, Drew Tadia.
All right, welcome to another edition of Exploring Mind and Body. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for being a part of our True Form Life community. If you're tuning in as a new listener, or if you've been listening to us for years, we're nationally syndicated across the country. We're on 7 terrestrial radio stations, and many of you may be listening as a podcast around the world. It's absolutely amazing to bring like-minded people together. Now, today we're bringing on another fantastic guest. This is Chef Del Sroufe, and he's an absolute pleasure. We had so many great conversations around food, or having kids help out in the kitchen, around plant-based. Now today I should mention that we are going to be talking about his new book called The China Study Family Cookbook. Now Del is vegan, these recipes are vegan, and they're also plant-based, of course, being vegan. So we've got a lot of tips and takeaways. Del actually lost over 200 pounds, if you could imagine. You did hear earlier in the intro, he gained 200 on a vegan diet, if you could imagine. But he's just going to talk about regular things that he did cooking-wise and eating-wise, and then lifestyle of how he was able to drop over 200 pounds and work towards living that healthy lifestyle that we talk about so often here on Exploring Mind and Body. Super excited to share this with you. Sit back and enjoy. We got all that coming up on...
This is Exploring Mind and Body. Naturally improve your lifestyle one show at a time with your host, Drew Tadia.
All right, welcome to Exploring Mind and Body. We have Del with us, who we're going to talk about his brand new book here. But before we get into those details, I want to welcome you to the show, Del. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So Del, your book is called, I'm looking at it right here. Let me just hold it up for those of our listeners that are going to be watching. So if you're listening on air only, I've got Del here through a Skype recorder here, and we actually get to see him. So that's kind of cool. Del, this is called the China Study Family Cookbook. And I guess, again, before we get into those details, tell us about yourself and how you got into working with plant-based foods and being a chef.
Yeah, it was almost an accident, actually. I was in school at Ohio State University studying business and hating it, and decided that I was going to drop out, much to my parents' chagrin. And I went to work for a vegetarian restaurant here in Columbus, Ohio, as assistant manager. I ended up staying there 8.5 years and moved out of front of the house management to back of the house management and into cooking. I've been cooking since I was 8 years old, so it was an easy transition. I decided that's where I wanted to be, and 8.5 years later, I was vegan and opening up my own vegan bakery. So I did that for 4 years, and of course, the vegan bakery back then, we back in the 80s, this is the early 90s even, we thought that being vegan itself was healthy. There were very few, now Dr. Esselstyn knew better by then, and a few others knew better, but we were still in the realm of, as long as it's vegan, you're doing good for yourself and good for the planet. But I gained 200 pounds on a vegan diet, and
Wow.
found out the hard way that you can't eat whatever you want. you gotta think differently about food choices. So that was how I got started. I left the vegan bakery and started my own meal delivery service, and eventually that led me to where I'm at now, which is Wellness Form Health. We are a healthcare company that focuses on making informed consumers and teaching them that diet trumps all when it comes to a lot of our chronic conditions, and it certainly has helped me.
So what are the things that you guys do at Wellness Form Health? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Wellness Form Health. We're primarily education driven. So we believe that it's the right of all consumers to have the basic information, to know the risks and benefits of all tests, procedures, medications, and decisions that affect their health. And given that knowledge, most people will choose dietary intervention over medical intervention. Currently, you don't have that option. So we work with both consumers and healthcare providers. So we work with the consumers to make you better able to have the conversation, to make you better informed, to be able to ask the right questions. With healthcare professionals, we're working with doctors and dietitians and nurses and on and on and on to help them to incorporate this kind of protocol into their practices so that they too can have that informed decision, as we call it.
So what kind of foods were you eating on a vegan diet that caused you to gain? How much weight did you gain?
I gained 200 pounds on a vegan diet. Now, I've always been a big guy. I've been on diets all my life, but I went from around 230, 240 to almost 500 pounds on a vegan diet, eating, foods that are high with oil, added oils, white flour, and sugar. Of course, baked goods and the like included. One of my early favorite dishes, I used to make this oven-fried tofu dish, which we now make without oil. But back then we made it with oil. And, tofu is high fat as it is, so it easily adds up. So eating a vegan diet, but eating the unhealthiest of choices. And then at the least healthy of those times, I can remember that sometimes going home from work after a 12 or 14-hour day and a 6-pack of beer and a bag of potato chips was dinner. Now, don't judge, but that was what it was, right? So it had some pretty unhappy consequences for me.
So you moved from there into a different type of lifestyle. What was the tipping point, or where was the time that you were like, I need to make a change from what's going on now to transitioning your life to losing, what did you say, 200 pounds?
Yeah, over 200 pounds. In 2005 or so, about 4 years after I closed the bakery, I fell and I broke an ankle and my foot. I didn't have health insurance at the time. We Americans back then didn't have universal health care. So I didn't have health insurance, and I was self-employed, and if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. So I got up off the ground. I walked into the house, wrapped my foot up in a gauze bandage, took some aspirin, and went back to work. Now, at 500 pounds, putting any kind of pressure on that kind of a break, it never really healed. And it was about a year after that of walking around on pain medications and such, working only when I could, and et cetera, that I decided I needed to do something differently. And I'd been aware of the Wellness Forum. We were here in the same town together. I'd been manufacturing some product for them and decided that maybe I needed to ask for help, and I did. I became a member of the Wellness Forum. I took our introductory course called, back then it was Wellness 101. Now it's called Informed Health 101. And started to change my relationship with food.
What was something, if there's someone of our listeners right now that are like, I need to make a change in my lifestyle, what was maybe the first thing or the easiest thing that helped you understand that this is how I make a change and this is how I can make a difference in my health? We
can talk about it in terms of like the easiest changes is to make, on a vegan diet, understanding that whole foods fuel the body and they fuel it in a way that works in synergy with the body to give you the nutrients that you need. And in other words, if you eat the right diet, you don't have to count calories, you don't have to count nutrients, you don't have to do any of that stuff. You eat until you're full and then you stop. Okay. Now, foods there are foods that help, those in the whole foods, low fat, plant-based beans, grains, fruits and vegetables in abundance. Those foods are great. You eat a lot of them. And then foods that you don't want to eat as much of, low quantities of high-fat foods and things like that. And then staying away from oils and processed foods and sugar, white flour, etc. And learning to do that made it a lot easier to understand how to make that change, right? So getting rid of all of those things. The oil went out of the kitchen. I was not eating dairy at the time or meat, but the white sugar, the processed sugars gone, the white flour gone, And it made a pretty good difference. I started losing weight right away.
What was it about the vegan lifestyle that you wanted to, or vegan food for, let's just say, why did you go that route?
Why did I go vegan in the first place? There are times when I think that it was because, I was in an environment, 8.5 years in a vegan or vegetarian restaurant, working with people who were some were vegetarian, some were vegan, and some had very strong opinions about what veganism was about, including the owner of the restaurant, though she was vegetarian before she died, not vegan. A lot of it made sense. The discussion about how animals are treated in animal agriculture in this country especially really resounded with me. And then the impact on our environment also spoke loudly to me back then. So it was, it made it a lot easier to say, well, man, maybe I don't need to do this. And after 8.5 years of eating all this amazing food that came out of our kitchen, I was like, well, this isn't too hard. There's no struggle here. And I not really feel like I'm giving up much when I'm eating all this really amazing food. So it's kind of an easy thing to do.
Sometimes the show once a week or even twice a week just isn't enough. So if you want more content, if you want to know more about what we're doing at True Form Life, you can find us on Facebook. We're on there posting at least twice a day, in the morning and the evening. That's at facebook.com/trueformlife. Or on Instagram. That's kind of my favorite platform. I like to post my food pictures and some of the activities that I do, maybe hiking or whatever that may be. And that's just at Drew Tadia on Instagram, and then Twitter as well. That's at True Form Life. So we're highly active. We'd love to connect with you. So find us on your social media platform and let us know how you're enjoying our show. Was it easy for you to continue on that vegan lifestyle? Do you eat 100% vegan right now?
There were challenges. Like in the early days, I would eat vegan, but then at the holidays home with family, it was such an emotional hotbed of an issue that I would just I'd give up and eat what the family was eating and then go back, after the holidays to my vegan diet. And then a couple times I panicked after when I wasn't, like when I was weighing 500 pounds, in a panic, I went back to meat eating, thinking that I could lose weight more quickly if I did that. And it actually didn't work at all. So, but for a long time, for many years now, I've been strictly vegan and focusing more on whole foods than just veganism.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about how you went back to you go to your family's house and they have meat and such. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that. Those of us that move towards more of a plant-based diet, those of us that live a healthier lifestyle, it's challenging when you go to family or friends and they have types of foods that you're not used to having. So maybe sometimes we don't want to hurt their feelings, or we don't want to, we don't want everyone to look at us like we got 3 heads just because we want to make different choices.
Well, it was almost more the response when I finally did come out as strictly vegan to my family. The response was really kind of emotional. Actually, I was amazed at some of the reactions that I got. We used to go to my Aunt Jackie's house. She was kind of the glue that held the family together, and we were a large family back then. And I can remember bringing in my own food, and she goes, "So what? My food's not good enough for you anymore?" It's the kind of response that you get. Yeah. And one of my cousins walking by and looking at me and going, why are you being so difficult? And this is me cooking and taking my own food 100 miles to her house. So I'm not imposing on anybody. I didn't walk in and say, hey, I can't have any of this around me. Hey, I can't be near this or anything like that. I'm like, hey, eat what you want. I'm going to eat what I want. And still you get this. And even my dad was like, why would you upset, your aunt like that? So my mother was the same way. There's this emotional reaction of like, well, how can I cook for you if you're not going to eat my cooking? I'm like, well, you could cook this way for me. And that never went over very well. So it was a long time of that before. And then finally, it was some of my younger cousins. I had 2 cousins, one from LA that is vegan. And she actually showed up with a vegan dish one year. And we sort of had this sort of bonding over it. And it kind of empowered us and made everyone else kind of like, oh, okay, there's more to this than him just being a difficult person.
This is a real thing. People actually do this.
Well, then of course you publish a cookbook, a vegan cookbook, and then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, so you're serious about this now, right?" So you want to get the family on board, publish that first vegan cookbook, and you'll be good to go.
That's probably a whole nother interview, how to do that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that's powerful story right there, or experience, because I think we all go through it, and when we do our coaching and working with our clients, it's the same thing around the holidays, around Christmas. It's so challenging to remain healthy and stick with your daily habits when you go to family. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, sure.
Del, let's get into the book a bit more. A beautiful cookbook. Tell us why you decided to go this route, and just more details before we actually get into it.
It's kind of funny. People have asked me a lot of why a family cookbook, and I'm like, well, if you think about it, we all come from one, so we all have this relationship with that part of our lives that we can respond to. The recipes, I think, are meant for everybody, whether you're cooking for your own family or not. They're very, very approachable recipes. They're kind of family favorites in my world, and things that people can go, "Oh, I recognize that." Mac and cheese, oh, I get that. Pizza, oh, I get that. Foods that you identify with. And in a way, it makes it my favorite of the 4 cookbooks. Don't tell Forks Over Knives this, but it makes it my favorite cookbook because of that level of identity, the approachability of the recipes and the ingredients in there that everyone can sort of see and understand. Beyond that, though, the stories that we tell of people who have adopted the plant-based diet and had different levels of success, I think, are a key part of the book. So you get to meet the Campbell family, who is all in. Dr. Campbell and his wife and their children and their grandchildren all eat this whole foods plant-based diet. Some of these kids have never seen animal foods on their plate before, ever, right? And you hear their stories and what their parents went through and at school and all kinds of things. And then you hear the stories of others who go home and it's a mixed bag. So maybe one family member yes, one family member no. One kid eats plant-based at home, but when he goes out in public, doesn't want to be embarrassed around his friends, so he eats what he wants, and his parents are, what do you say about that, right? So you get to hear all of those stories, and I think those are very relatable. And then most importantly are the cooking tips for getting kids into the kitchen. My quote is, kids who cook become adults who cook. Nice. And so the younger you get them into that kitchen, I was in there when I was 7 years old. I had divorced parents. My dad had to learn how to cook, so he and I learned how to cook together. I've been cooking ever since. My younger brother's been cooking ever since. But getting kids in there, and we talk about very young kids, 2 years old, and they're banging pots and pans and doing whatever they can to contribute, and then making them a part of that whole process, the decision making and all, really goes a long way towards getting them on board.
Yeah, it's so important to get the kids involved, and that's a great message to share with our audience, because I think many times we're dealing with, it's more the later the kids are, the later that we get them involved, the more challenging it is. I was just going to say, so if we could get them going early, if we could get them going, helping finding items at the grocery store and teaching them what it is, what it looks like, where to find them, and then that translates to the kitchen, we'd be so much better off.
Yeah, no matter what food choices your kids make as they get older, the foods that they cook at home will always be healthier than the foods that you eat out in public. Because let's face it, you don't find oil-free, plant-based cooking anywhere in the world yet. There's only 2 or 3 restaurants around the country that do it. So there's just not a lot of it. We do it. We have a carry-out service here, but we're the only one in the city that offers especially oil-free vegan food. And so it's just hard to do. But anything that you cook at home is healthier than what you cook out in public. That's just the nature of the beast.
Tell our audience what you use instead of oil, or why you're able to prepare your foods without oil.
I think it's easier than people think. If you teach people, and you can go to to the wellnessforumhealth.com webpage and look at our YouTube channel, and you'll find a video of me sauteing without oil. So it's a pretty straightforward process. You use a little bit of water as necessary to deglaze your pan, or you can use vegetable broth if you want. I use low sodium vegetable broth. And it makes it pretty easy. All of my recipes are structured so that the oil-free cooking is an inherent part of the recipe. So you'll you'll get used to cooking that way if you follow those recipes. But in baking, I use applesauce in place of oil or butter. It works really well. Unsweetened applesauce, it adds a lot of moisture without adding a lot of its own flavor. So it's a pretty easy one to do. But it's not as hard as people think.
How about bananas? Use bananas instead of applesauce?
Not as much. I use bananas if I'm wanting something that has a banana flavor. So I tend to gear it towards what I'm trying to do. Pureed prunes are something that some people use. The applesauce, any kind of fruit puree, depending on what you're making, just keeping in mind that whatever you do is going to influence the flavor of the finished product.
I just want to touch on kids in the kitchen again, and I love that because I feel it's so important to get kids in the kitchen. What are some things that we can do to get kids in the kitchen or to help their parents out so we can turn kids cooking into adult cooking?
I think a starting place might be getting kids in on the decision making. So you get them into the grocery store and you're showing them some of the different vegetables that maybe they've never seen before, and letting them pick out the vegetables that they're going to eat at home for dinner that night. Let them have that say, so that they get that freedom of choice for them is a very empowering kind of thing. And then looking at different ways to eat food. So you're saying to a kid, look, we can make stir fry with your broccoli tonight. We can make a broccoli chowder or a broccoli bisque. We can make it into soup. What do you want to make, and do you want to help with that? Mm-hmm. And it goes a long way. Now, remember, with younger kids, the attention span is about this big. It's about a minute long. So you give them a tool or a bowl or whatever and let them go as long as they are, and then they're going to be off doing their own thing again. But, I had a 4-year-old niece that would come down to my bakery when I had the bakery, and she would sit there for an hour and play with the bread dough and do different things if I let her. She'd make a mess, but I think it was more important. She still cooks. She's a great cook now. She's 19, 20 years old and still cooking. So it really does work getting them into that kitchen.
Tell us, your book is called The China Study Family Cookbook. For those of our listeners that might not be familiar with the China Study, can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, the China Study is probably still the largest study of human nutrition ever undertaken. It looks at the relationship between diet and cancer in some 2,400 Chinese counties back in the 70s. This started, and showed a relationship between the amount of animal protein intake and different cancers. So it's insane. There are 94,000 correlations that this book made, that the study made between cancer and diet, and animal protein consumption and diet, and cholesterol and fat and diet. 8,000 of them are what we call statistically significant, which means that there's a real strong connection between the statistic and that relationship between diet and disease. So it's very, very powerful. It's sold over 1 million copies. It informs a lot of what we do here in terms of diet, and it shows that there is a relationship between animal foods and not only cancer, but heart disease, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, acne, on and on and on. The list is insane of the number of chronic diseases that are impacted by our dietary choices. It's led some to say there really is only one disease with lots of these little symptoms that run around, and then one diet that addresses it all.
When it says the China Study Family Cookbook, it's related to because the Campbell family? They're involved with the designing of the meals? Leanne
Campbell is my co-author and editor of the book, so she approves all of the recipes, but I pretty much got carte blanche on the recipes because we've worked together. This is our second cookbook together. The last one I did was the China Study Quick and Easy Cookbook. But they definitely, their influence is in making sure that all the meals fit into that low-fat, whole foods, plant-based realm. That's what they care about the most. And then beyond that, they really spend more time. Dr. Campbell spends more time talking about the science than he does about dinner. His wife really does the dinner side of the equation in that family. Okay. In fact, here, his story in the book when he says when they first started seeing this relationship between animal protein and cancer, it was Karen, his wife, and he tells a story in the book that said that maybe we need to start eating less meat. And it's not like they went all vegan all at once, but they started cutting back on the amount of meat that they were consuming, and then eventually the dairy, and then eventually they went all in on plant-based.
I got to ask you a difficult question here. If someone were to pick up your book and they had to find maybe one or two recipes, I know it's like asking a parent what their favorite child is. If someone picked up your book and they can only grab one or two recipes, where would you direct them to?
Americans love it, so I always send them to mac and cheese first.
Okay.
We are a mac and cheese society, so you can't go wrong there. It's a really good mac and cheese. It's relatively low fat compared to many of the other versions on the internet, and it's got great flavor. So that's one of my top ones. You can use that same cheese sauce that you make mac and cheese with to make quesadillas or to make pizza, scallop potatoes. So there's any number of uses for it. And I'm a guy that likes to cook one thing and then find different ways to use it. So start off with mac and cheese. Huh?
So that's vegan, so there's no cheese.
Oh, yeah. It's a potato base. It's potatoes and red pepper and onions and nutritional yeast, a little bit of lemon juice and garlic and salt, and that's about it.
Before we wrap things up here, tell us where they can find the book, maybe where they can follow you. What's going on with you moving forward?
A couple of things. You can find the book on Amazon or in major book retailers online and in stores. You can buy it at my website. We will sign it for you and ship it to you. That's chefdelsroufe.com. And you can follow me on Facebook. Look up Chef Del Sroufe or Chef Del on Facebook. And check me out this Sunday. I'm doing my first Facebook Live cooking event. So we're going to get in the kitchen and prepare some of the recipes from the cookbook so that people can see how easy some of this is and how tasty.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Exploring Mind and Body. As always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sticking around till the end. I want to thank Del for coming on. That was awesome. So many takeaways there. I really think that getting the kids in the kitchen at an early age offers so many advantages. Just take, for example, some of our clients that we work with, they have issues with getting their kids to eat healthier when they're a little bit older. When I mean a little bit older, I'm talking about 8, 9, 10 years old. But if you get them started out as early as possible, then they'd be more interested in being involved in the kitchen and grocery shopping and helping with meal planning and creating the meals and like making it fun. That means so much. And I think that taking a step back and listening to Del's story and how he was able to make better choices and improve his health, that's just a good example of the things that we can do together to make better choices in our lives. Given that this is a family cookbook, I just think that when you open the book, there's so many takeaways that you can open up and be like, oh, I'm going to try this recipe. Del mentioned his vegan mac and cheese. I actually got a chance to try it. It's absolutely amazing. So those are the things that you can expect when you pick up the book. Again, it's called the China Study Family Cookbook. I want to thank Lindsay from Bembella Books. I've been working with Lindsay for years now, and she sends over these incredible authors and these books for us to have a look at and share on social media. So thanks to Lindsay, thanks to Bembella, thanks to Del again for coming on and sharing his insights with us. If you want more details as to what we have going on, head over to trueformlife.com. This is where we do more of our nutrition and our fitness planning ourselves. So we have a 7-day plank challenge, for example. That's a great way for you to get started and offer you like a little bit of a challenge to get you going in the right direction. That's free. All you have to do is enter in your email address so we know exactly where to send that. All these past shows are going up on exploringmindandbody.com. So if you miss any shows, all you have to do is head over to that website there and you can track all the shows and see what we've missed, like some of the past interviews we have from Bembella, for example, or more plant-based type of shows. We've done a handful of vegan shows as well. If you're vegan or want to learn more about it, exclusively for Exploring Mind and Body listeners, we're offering a $1 our monthly membership. This is $99 value is what we charge per month. We do recipes, grocery shopping lists, meal planning. We also put together fitness routines to help you get going in the right direction. And finally, we offer full support. So we're in there day in and day out asking questions, or we have other members asking asking questions or answering questions. It's a great little community. That's only for $1. So if you'd like to check that out, head over to trueformlife.com. Don't forget about our free app that you can download on any Apple device. That's it. That's all I got. I'm out of here. As always, I'm your host, Drew Tadia, in health and fitness for a better world. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Exploring Mind and Body with Trueform Life's Drew Tadia, fitness expert. To find out more about the show, Drew Tadia, or to listen to past shows, visit exploringmindandbody.com.